Hey everybody, I'm Zach Peterman. I'm here to do my Disabilities in the Media presentation for SPED620. I did my presentation on the film A Beautiful Mind on Dr. John Nash, and I did my book on the Bad Day, Benji and Me. So we're going to start with the film. It's from 2001. It's about John Nash, who won the Nobel Prize in the 90s. One of the smartest mathematicians, certainly of the last 100 years. But he also suffered from schizophrenia. In real life, the symptoms came on while he was in grad school in his 20s. The film shows him coming on a little bit later, but they keep to the same general flow of his life, and they show the struggle of not only Dr. Nash trying to live his life, right, but also those around him and how they can show support or not, depending on the situation. Which kind of brings me into the positives. If you've seen the film, this picture is from a pretty sad scene, but I think that's part of the positive of the films is that they try to do a realistic presentation. And part of that realistic presentation is that, Dr. Nash probably wouldn't have been able to manage his symptoms without the support of communities, individuals, friends, family, his wife. There's a great scene where he comes back to his university to find his old sort of, I guess, rival student back from when he was in grad school, and kind of just says, he expresses out loud his need for that community and how his wife and him think that it will improve his ability. And it's true, right? You got to have other people. It shows that those communities, maybe, his old rival welcomed him back, but, there's then follow-up scenes of students mocking him and him struggling to fit in, right? So it's realistic about it. We need those communities, we need that acceptance, but not everyone's able to do that, understands the need for that, or is willing to, right? So for those of us that are willing to create these welcoming environments, then it's that much more important, right? It shows the struggle of living with schizophrenia, and I think the impact of treatment, right? There's the insulin shock therapy scene, which is difficult to watch, I think, for a lot of people. But that's how it was in the 1970s, Not that schizophrenia is amazingly well understood, but certainly we've made strides in our treatment. And it shows that there is improvement in the day-to-day lives of individuals with schizophrenia, and many of them can manage their disability, right? It's a disability that can really impact your just ability to fit in and function in society, right? And I think showing that the ups and downs of John Nash's life is important because there are really bad days, really bad scenes, right? But the film does end on a happy note, which is how his life ended, right? This isn't accurate. His life, he kind of went out on top. He won the Nobel Prize. He was back to lecturing. He did pass away about 13, 14 years ago, I believe. And ultimately, this film really works hard to evoke empathy for the main character, but not in a stereotypical way. I mean, there are some scenes. If you walk into this film not knowing that he has schizophrenia and not knowing sort of the real life situation of John Nash, for the first 15 to 20 minutes of the film, you probably think, this guy's like, he doesn't fit in well, he's antisocial, right? Things like that. And it's a very it's like just a non-stereotypical display of this disability, which gives like a more natural empathy. It's not a caricature of someone with schizophrenia, which is nice. So there are some negatives, I think, but they're kind of nitpicky. I do think the film overall is regarded well and accepted. And certainly John Nash himself said he appreciated the portrayal, so that should say something. But the first thing is they're all visual hallucinations in the film, for the most part, because there's like scenes early on in the film where you're not, in hindsight, you're like, maybe he's hallucinating and it's more auditory. You don't really know that at the time. In the real life story of John Nash, almost all of his hallucinations were auditory, so that's important. And making it all visual kind of follows along that trope of media saying, mass media anyway, saying I'm going to take this one disability and reduce it to this single symptom. But it's a movie, so I can kind of see where they made that call. Also, it portrays schizophrenia as something that can be solved, but Dr. Nash is a very unique case. We're talking about a Nobel Prize winning mathematician, one of the smartest human beings, ever. And his ability to sort of rationalize away his auditory hallucinations might not be an approach for every single person in the world, right? I mean, this is not an average individual. And so that is somewhat problematic. You don't want someone to see it and go, okay, I'm just going to fix this on my own with no help, because that's not what happened. But I think some people could sort of half watch the film, not really commit to watching it fully, and walk away with that perception. It also says it portrays medication almost as a complete negative. They threw in a line at the end of the film where he mentions he's been taking modern medicine. But that's also not true. He never took medicine after like the 1970s, I believe. And so this is sort of an attempt, I think, by the director, writers of the film to kind of be like, hey, there's a lot of schizophrenics who need medication, and that's okay, right? So I don't. That's one thing that probably that's my biggest complaint against the film. It also makes the hospitalization treatment aspect of this mental health crisis he's undergoing. I mean, when it gets really, really bad, they kind of portray it as kind of quick. Part of that, I think, is just to keep the pacing of the film regular. But, you know, this is something where someone might be in and out of hospital care. And that's okay. That's how you decide you have to manage this disorder, right? But I'm not sure if the way they portray it in this film is really the most common or a good way to generalize it. And finally, one little complaint is it kind of shows the doctor versus the patient or the patient's family. And I think that is somewhat of a stereotype we think of. I don't know if it's a positive one, right? Because ultimately, everybody should want the best for the individual. And by portraying it as some sort of conflict, it certainly adds something to a film, right? But I don't think we should always paint medical professionals, mental health professionals, as sort of being anti the individual. That's not ideal. So overall, I think the film is a really good film. I mean, it won awards, right? But I think it's a really good portrayal. They use no heavy stereotypes, right? John Nash is not painted as the victim primarily. He's not painted as the hero. He's not painted as, at worst, the stereotype would be, oh, someone with, this type of mental illness is incredibly intelligent. But I'm not sure if that really holds with schizophrenia so much. And so I just think not, staying away from all the stereotypes is great. There's a scene where he's lashing out physically against those he loves because he's in such a problematic episode. And it's little things like that that show the reality and keep it away from being an overly driven by emotion film. I think the questions to show visual, or that idea to show visual hallucinations rather than auditory. This is a film, right? It's something we're viewing with our eyes and our ears, but primarily our eyes. And so I can sort of hand wave that one where I'm not as bothered. And again, John Nash appreciated this. So I think if the person who suffered from schizophrenia their whole life can watch this film and say, hey, it's not exactly what I went through, but it captures the spirit of it, I think that's a really ringing endorsement. So our second one, this is going to be my book, Benji, the Bad Day and Me. This was a really fun part of the assignment for me because I teach college. I'm trying to teach high school math when I graduate here. I don't really interact with children's books or children, so looking through all the books was kind of fun. I looked through the New York Public Library, had a good resource for children's books with portrayals of disabilities. Ultimately, I settled on Benji, the Bad Day and Me. Probably should have picked one where I had more negatives, but I really liked this book. I left a YouTube video by the publisher up where somebody reads the book, and it's not animated, but they kind of move the drawn pictures around. It's nice though. Please click on it if you're interested. But it's about a small family, mother, 2 children. There's the narrator, you don't get their name, and then Benji, his brother. And so basically this narrator has a terrible day, by any grade school kid's account, the worst day ever, right, that's ever been had. And he comes home and he sees that his brother Benji also had a really bad day. And Benji's afforded some more liberties when he has a bad day than the narrator. And that's kind of questioned, right? And so let's talk about the goods and the bads of this book. So it's written from the eyes of the child. So it's natural that a child would question, in this scene right here, it's like, hey, I just spilled milk everywhere and I'm miserable because, this is like the cherry on top of this horrible day. And yet my little brother is allowed to play in a box with a blanket and given all these liberties, everybody tiptoe, everybody be quiet, don't knock his stuff over. why is he given all of this privilege because he's having a bad day? And like, I got milk and cereal everywhere, right? No, where's my attention? And I think that's good because a lot of siblings can relate to that, right? I think even just kids, right? Seeing someone treated slightly differently to school, maybe someone has a bit of a emotional flare up or something like that, and they're removed from a classroom, and someone thinks, well, I don't get removed from the classroom when I'm getting upset, you know? So this is something that I think children can relate to in general, and I think the best part of any media is being able to relate to it, right? So that's great. It also never paints Benji in a negative light. They say he had a bad day at preschool, but they never say what that means. And I like that, right? Because bad day, good day, that's a code we use a lot, even as students get older. It can mean a lot of things, right? And it's good. It's context dependent. It depends on the child, right? It depends on the day, it depends on the task at hand. And I think leaving it ambiguous like that makes it really easy to relate to, and also not, you're not going to cast judgment on Benji in any way. And ultimately, this book is all about like family support. So to sort of spoil the ending for you, Benji ends up comforting his older brother, which I think is a really nice moment. And the mom's like, "Yay, we're all together." But everything you see about interventions, especially early interventions, and Benji's a preschool-aged kid, is about familial support, community support, right? So it's just kind of beating on the most important part of all these interventions. I don't really have any negatives to this book. Maybe someone who's much more well versed in young children and education could help me. But from someone who educates older students, just kind of a fun thought experiment and a fun assignment, I thought this book nailed it, and that's why I picked it. So, maybe some of your preschool teachers are looking into it. I think it's a great portrayal of neurodivergent child from a child's perspective, which should make it easy for a child to understand. And just the emphasis on community familial support, I just really loved. So I have the references for both up and the link if you're interested, and thanks for watching my presentation.